Hey, tonight we're heading far, far back to a time of dry winds, sun-bleached stone, and mysteries that loom taller than most buildings on Earth. That's right, we're visiting the pyramids of Egypt, but not just to gawk at their shape or wonder how they lasted so long. No, tonight we're going to walk beside the people who actually built them. And spoiler, you probably wouldn't survive 10 minutes there, not because of whips or curses, but because of the heat, the rhythm, and the sheer patience required. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere across the world, comment your location and local time. It's always fun to see where you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of the desert. The moon hangs low and full, casting silvery light over the plains of Giza. Before you, the Great Pyramid rises like a giant waiting in stillness, its edges sharp even after 4,500 years. But instead of starting at the top, we go lower, past the tourist paths, beyond the camera flashes, into the forgotten soil where sand has been brushed away by careful hands. The year is somewhere around 2550 BCE. Pharaoh Khufu rules the land, and he's made a decision he will build the greatest tomb ever constructed. Not for vanity. He says, though let's be honest, there's plenty of that, but to secure his journey into the afterlife and leave a mark that time itself must bow to. You blink. He succeeded. But Khufu won't lift a finger to cut the stone or shape the passageways. That task falls to thousands of workers, and not just any workers, craftsmen, bakers, engineers, foremen, haulers, and yes, laborers with dust in their lungs and sunburn on their backs. What surprises you first is the calm. It's not a scene of chaos. No one is screaming. No lashes snap through the air. In fact, you hear something you didn't expect: laughter. And the clank of copper tools. You walk toward a glowing fire pit, where men are sharing bowls of stew and rounds of flatbread. Their hands are thick with calluses and their faces tired but not broken shine with sweat and pride. They speak of stone, of alignment, of tools dulling too soon and beer tasting too flat. One of them gestures proudly toward the pyramid's base, where his crew just laid a perfect corner block that morning. What you're seeing doesn't match the old image of slaves forced to drag giant stones beneath the whip. That's the myth that clung to these pyramids for centuries, especially after early historians and Hollywood added their flair. But archaeology tells a different story, quietly, carefully. You follow a winding path behind the pyramid site and come upon a low set of ruins. Mud brick walls barely 2 feet high outline old homes. This is the workers' village. Here lived the builders of the pyramid not in chains, but in rows of modest houses, the kind you wouldn't look at twice unless you knew what they represented. Inside one structure, you see grinding stones used to crush barley. There's a clay oven still blackened from baking, and near the door, broken pottery stamped with hieroglyphs. Names, crew titles, delivery counts. You're seeing an operation so organized, it could pass for a construction firm's field office if the office served beer and onions for lunch. At the edge of the village sits a cluster of larger rooms. That's where the foremen and scribes worked. In one room, a slab of limestone serves as a desk, and across its surface are markings, not prayers, not curses, but schedules. One crew worked sunrise to mid-afternoon. The next took over until dark. Rations were distributed according to output. You find a scroll fragment listing 10 loaves, 2 jugs beer, 1 dried fish for one man's shift. It wasn't luxury. No soft pillows or clean sheets. But it wasn't slavery either. These people were paid in food, clothing, and dignity. They worked for the pharaoh. Yes, but they also worked for their families, for their gods, for something that would last beyond their short, calloused lives. Back at the pyramid, the night wind picks up, carrying the scent of stone and ash. You pause beneath a torch hung in a hollow, where a man is oiling his copper chisel. His tools glint in the firelight. Nearby, another man chalks a red line across a block to guide tomorrow's cut. These tools look simple, rudimentary even. No lasers, no machines, just stone, copper, sweat, and math. And yet the pyramid rises. You step closer, your fingers brushing the weathered surface. Each block seems to whisper. It tells you that mystery doesn't always need magic. It can rest in skill, in planning, in people showing up every day to do something ridiculously hard for someone they'll never meet. And that might be the most human thing of all. You sit down on a ledge as the stars deepen overhead. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the Nile flows gently, its water reflecting the moon like a shifting ribbon. The workers will sleep soon, huddled in their homes, dreaming of bread, rest, and the morning sun. You lie back, the sand warm beneath you, and wonder not about aliens, or curses, or secret codes, but about what it takes to build something that lasts, and whether we're still capable of it. The sun rises gently over Giza, painting the limestone blocks with shades of rose and gold. You squint against the light and stretch your legs. The stillness of the night has given way to a hum of movement. Here comes the day shift, tired eyes blinking in the morning dust, shoulders rolling as if to prepare for the strain of hauling ancient ambition. You stand and follow them, down a packed earth path that leads not to the pyramid directly, but to something even more surprising, their homes. These aren't prison cells or crude huts. They're small, modest rectangles of mud brick weathered. Yes, but built with care. Inside, you see simple reed mats for sleeping, jugs of water sealed with mud, and even tiny charms or carved animal figurines tucked in the corners. Evidence of children, families, laughter. You almost expect to hear it now, though the voices you hear instead are focused and rhythmic, murmuring about tools, cuts, and how today's blocks need to be placed just so otherwise the entire line will be off by half a finger's width. And that cannot happen. Not under the foreman's watch. You trail a group of workers down toward a wide field where the quarry lies. The path is worn, but not chaotic. You expect to see overseers yelling, cracking whips perhaps like the movies always show, but instead you find a quiet authority. The men and women here, yes. Some are women know what they're doing. They've done it for weeks, months, maybe even years. Some of them were likely born into this work, just as their fathers were. And they hold that knowledge in the way they measure with string, mark with charcoal, and share a nod that replaces 100 shouted instructions. They form into crews. The crews are not random, they're organized, named, and ranked. You catch the faintest outline of one such name painted in faded red onto a block, the Friends of Khufu. Other names will follow: the Drunkards of Menkor, the Enduring Gang. These weren't official titles from Pharaoh's office. These were jokes, badges of honor, team names scratched into history. They are the human fingerprints beneath the grandeur. A call goes out. It's not a horn, not a trumpet, just a sharp, familiar sound. Time to move stone. And this is where you begin to understand the scale of effort. You walk behind the crew as they surround a massive limestone block. It's roughly the size of a modern SUV and weighs many tons. It doesn't look movable. But then, a rhythm begins. Ropes, levers, rollers, sand, water. That last one surprises you. A young worker pours a steady stream of water in front of the block as it's dragged. Why, you ask the question, but he's too busy to answer. So you look closer. The sand beneath becomes darker, slicker. Damp sand reduces friction. By just enough. Enough to save backs. Enough to roll another foot. Enough to avoid a crushed ankle. Historians still argue whether this technique was universal, whether it was just trial and error or ancient genius. But there it is. You saw it. And it works. You press your hand against the rope, feeling the fibers dig into your palm as the team pulls in concert. They chant. Not in unison exactly, but in the same spirit. The block lurches, groans, then slides forward a few inches. Applause erupts brief, tired, sincere. They reset the rollers, shift the ropes, take a drink of lukewarm beer, not for fun, for calories. It's bread and beer that keep this engine moving. The hauling continues. You follow until the stone is finally delivered to the construction ramp, an inclined plane of compacted rubble leading up the side of the growing pyramid. No one's quite sure how far those ramps extended. Some think they wrapped around the pyramid like a spiral. Others believe in a straight ramp stretching hundreds of meters. Some even argue it was dismantled and rebuilt again and again as the pyramid grew taller. The truth is, we don't know, not for sure. But whatever the shape, the stones made it up. You watch the team pass the block off to another crew stationed at the ramp. These workers specialize in lifting, adjusting, leveling. Their tools are simple copper chisels, dolerite pounding stones, wooden sledges, and a few clever tricks involving balance, levers, and plain old gravity. You notice that everything is done with an almost meditative patience. No one rushes. The pyramid isn't going anywhere. You sit at the base of the ramp and catch your breath. The midday sun is unforgiving. Shade is a rare commodity, and the workers make the most of it, leaning against blocks, passing around jugs of cool water. One man wipes his face with the edge of his tunic and tells a joke. You can't understand the words, but the others laugh, and the sound of it feels eternal. You walk past a man carving lines into a fresh stone block. His hand is steady, and his eyes are sharp with focus. He's not just measuring, he's correcting. That block is slightly warped from the quarry. If placed as is, it'll throw off the alignment of the entire row. So he adjusts. This happens constantly. Every error checked, rechecked, and accounted for. And somehow, despite it all, the thing grows. Layer by layer, stone by stone, not just a monument, but a collaboration. You're struck by the silence of it, the power of anonymous effort, the idea that none of these people will be remembered by name. Not the ones dragging, carving, mixing mortar, or building the ramps. Only the pharaoh will be remembered. And yet, none of this happens without them. You sit again, dust clinging to your clothes. The wind shifts. Someone hands you a small, roughly carved bead, a gift. Maybe, or just a token left behind. On its surface, a faint image, a falcon, wings spread, Horus, protector of kings. It's a reminder that while the work was physical, the purpose was spiritual. These people believed they were building not just a tomb, but a bridge, a passage between worlds. And they gave it everything. You close your eyes. The heat fades for a moment. You imagine the final block being placed, the last creak of rope, the last shout of triumph. Somewhere, a family celebrates. A child runs between the stones. A woman wipes her hands on her apron and smiles toward the horizon. This wasn't slavery. It was sacrifice. By the time the last load of stone is delivered for the day, the light begins to shift, no longer blazing but warm, golden, dust-laced. You walk back through the work site, past piles of tools carefully arranged and empty water jugs lined up for refilling. The sounds change, too. The chants and grunts of labor fade into quieter conversation. A flute melody played on a reed pipe, and the unmistakable crackle of fire starting in hearth pits. You follow the trail of the workers returning to their village, a routine as practiced as the stonework itself. Sand crunches beneath your feet as you pass from the dry work area to a small, bustling settlement. It is not grand, but it feels alive. The smell of baking bread hangs in the air, mixed with sweat and smoke and something vaguely sweet. A few children run barefoot through the narrow lanes, weaving between clusters of people gathered outside their homes. And it's here, at this village tucked behind the pyramids, that you start to understand a deeper truth. These builders didn't just survive, they lived. You crouch down beside a communal oven, watching as a woman expertly shapes dough and slides it onto the hot clay surface. She hums softly while she works. Next to her, two boys mash garlic into a paste using flat stones. Their movements are quick, learned. They glance at you and grin, and you realize you've been smiling without noticing. Behind them, another group tends to a bubbling pot of lentils, seasoned with cumin and coriander. A young man ladles out a portion into a bowl made of dried gourd, handing it off to a hunched older worker whose legs shake slightly as he sits. He groans not from pain, but relief. His hands are covered in old scars and fresh calluses. His ribs press against his tunic, but his face, as he sips the soup, is content. You sit near them, quietly observing. They eat slowly, savoring each bite like it's something earned, and it is. These workers weren't prisoners, at least not in the sense we think of. They weren't starved or shackled. They were fed, housed, paid, not in gold or jewels, but in bread, onions, beer, and shelter. By today's standards, it might sound meager, but here it was survival, stability, even dignity. Historians still argue whether this qualifies as freedom, whether these were state laborers or seasonal conscripts or something between. But in the cracks of daily life, these shared meals, the jokes passed around the fire, the care given to old injuries, you sense a different answer. These people mattered to someone, to each other. As the sky shifts into twilight, you're drawn to another part of the village, a quieter area, slightly raised, bordered by crumbling walls. Here, the hum of voices dies down, replaced by silence and stillness. You step over low thresholds into a small courtyard, where a faint scent of incense clings to the air. A woman kneels by a shallow grave, brushing sand away from carved stone. It's a cemetery, but not a pharaoh's tomb, not lined with gold or guarded by curses. These are humble resting places marked by stone slabs, decorated with symbols of eyes, birds, and tools. Some have names, scratched hastily but lovingly. Others are blank, worn smooth by centuries. You kneel beside one, running your fingers along the edge. It's rough, uneven, but deliberate. The people buried here were pyramid workers, and what's remarkable isn't that they died. Everyone did. It's that they were buried so close to the monument they helped build, that they were buried at all, with care, with ritual. That tells you something. In ancient Egypt, how you were buried said everything about who you were and what you were worth. These people weren't discarded. They were remembered. You rise and follow the path back toward the village. Night has settled, and fires flicker across the settlement like stars scattered on the earth. Inside the houses, voices rise and fall in soft rhythms, stories being told, songs being hummed, plans for tomorrow murmured over shared mats. You pass a home with a woven curtain drawn back. Inside, a woman tends to a child's fever. She dips cloth into a clay bowl and presses it to the child's forehead. In the corner, A man sharpens a tool by candlelight. His movements are careful, practiced. The blade must be ready by dawn. It's easy to forget, when we look at pyramids, that they came from human hands, that they required families, routines, community, that the people who built them also lived small, meaningful lives full of fatigue, yes, but also full of connection. You hear laughter behind you. A group of young men are gathered around a small fire, passing a jug between them and joking loudly. One pretends to be a priest, reciting nonsense blessings in a nasal voice while the others collapse in laughter. They tease, they imitate, they mimic the pharaoh's decrees in exaggerated tones. It's rough comedy, but warm and ancient. You realize suddenly that if you didn't know the language, you might think it was any modern group of co-workers at the end of a long shift. Humor, too, survives the centuries. Someone hands you a small clay figure, a hippo, with a smile and oversized eyes. A joke gift, perhaps, or maybe a charm. You hold it, running your thumb across its painted back. You wonder if its maker thought it would last this long. Probably not, but here it is. And above it all, in the distance, the pyramid looms, not as a symbol of divine will or brutal control, but as the quiet sum of thousands of small efforts. Meals shared, tools repaired, stones hauled, lines drawn, jokes told. You sit again, cross-legged in the sand, listening as the village settles into rest. No drums, no ceremonies, just the sound of people winding down after a day of doing their part. You close your eyes and try to imagine what dreams they might have had. Of fields along the Nile, of family visits, of cooler days, of lighter loads. Maybe even of the pyramid completed, their work rising forever into the sky. They may not have written history, but they built it, morning again. The light is softer today, filtered through a haze that hangs low over the desert. You rise with the workers, though your limbs feel heavier than yesterday. Maybe it's the air, or the rhythm of the place settling into your bones. You stretch as others do, shoulders rolling, necks cracking softly, and head toward the edge of the village where tools are being checked, ropes coiled, and water skins filled. But today, instead of following the teams towards the pyramid ramp, you veer left toward an area that hums with a different kind of energy. There's no shouting here, no dragging of stones or pounding of dolerite. This is where plans are drawn, instructions given, and records kept. Welcome to the center of ancient project management. You step into a long, shaded structure built of timber and clay, walls painted with streaks of faded red and black. The air is cooler here, stirred by cross breezes and the scratch of styluses against papyrus. Scribes sit on reed mats, hunched over documents, tracking deliveries, counting rations, and noting labor rotations. Their fingers are stained with ink. Their eyes rarely leave the page. One glances up and offers a nod. He's young, but carries himself like someone much older, worn down by numbers. Not stone. In front of him, a sheet of papyrus lists line after line of notations names. Tasks, quantities. This man knows who worked where yesterday, how many jugs of beer were issued, who showed up late, who broke a chisel. He is, in many ways, as vital to the pyramid as the stonecutters themselves. Next to him, an older scribe uses a pointed stick to tap on a clay tablet. He mutters under his breath as he recounts an order for timber from the Nile Delta, likely meant for scaffolding or sled runners. The system is rudimentary but precise. Ancient spreadsheets, if you will carefully maintained with ink, memory, and relentless patience. Historians still argue how centralized these systems were, whether Pharaoh's court directed every detail, or if local administrators had autonomy. But the records don't lie. Someone was keeping count. Someone made sure every onion, every loaf, every ounce of copper had a destination. You step into the next room, and the tone shifts again. Here, foremen gather in groups, reviewing diagrams drawn in ochre on stone slabs. You see markings, you recognize slope angles, corner alignments, load estimates. These aren't sacred texts. They're engineering plans precise, mathematical, practical. One foreman demonstrates how to shift a block ever so slightly to compensate for a minor incline in the base layer. His hands move with certainty, fingers curling around imaginary levers. The others nod, murmuring agreement. Then they break apart, heading out to pass these details to their teams. It's easy to think of ancient Egypt as a place of mysticism, of gods and rituals and unknowable wisdom. And yes, that's part of it. But here, you see something else: problem-solving, trial and error, a willingness to adapt. They didn't have computers or lasers, but they had chalk, they had ropes, and above all, they had time. Not far from the planning room, you come upon a storage area. Long shelves of stone tools line the walls, each sorted by type: chisels, hammers, measuring cords, bronze levels with embedded beads of oil for balance. There's a crate filled with red pigment used to mark stone cuts, and another filled with scraps of worn-out sandals. Even those are catalogued, awaiting repair or reuse. You pick up a copper chisel, its edge nicked and dulled. It fits in your hand like it was meant to be there. Light, but not fragile. You imagine the hundreds of strikes it endured before being traded out for a sharper one. One tool in a cycle of thousands. You step outside into the sun, where a different group of workers is preparing mortar. It's a dusty, tedious task, grinding gypsum and sand into a paste, wetting it, testing consistency with practiced fingers. One woman hums as she works, tapping the side of her mixing bowl like a makeshift drum. She offers you a smile and dips her fingers into the mix, pressing it between two flat stones. It oozes slightly but holds. She nods, approved. She motions for a helper to carry it to the ramp. There's something deeply human in these rituals: the testing, the repeating, the adjusting. It's easy to romanticize the results, to stand in awe of towering monuments and forget that they were built by hands just like yours. Hands that got blisters, that dropped tools, that laughed, that buried friends. Your next stop is a large, tented space where tools are repaired. Men sit cross-legged, reshaping wooden handles, sharpening stone heads, hammering copper edges against anvils. It smells of sweat, smoke, and resin. The clang of metal on stone echoes softly. One boy no more than 10 runs errands between workstations, carrying buckets of water and strips of linen used for binding cracked tools. Someone hands you a blade to inspect. You run your thumb gently along its edge and are surprised to feel how sharp it still is. Then again, it has to be. Every dull strike wastes time. Every broken tool delays the whole team. Here, every moment is precious. You glance beyond the tents, toward the pyramid rising slowly in the distance. It gleams in the sun, its polished casing stones catching the light. You remember standing next to it days ago, marveling at its size. But now, you know what really built it: meetings, schedules, meal counts, repairs, quiet brilliance stitched into the mundane. You walk along a shaded path back to the village. A donkey brays nearby. And somewhere, someone is singing off-key. Another day is ending, but the planning never stops. Even now, foremen sit in the flickering light of oil lamps, drafting tomorrow's assignments. Scribes tally deliveries. Mothers mend clothes. Children play pretend with sticks and dust, building their own tiny pyramids. You sit at the edge of the village, watching the sky change color. It turns pink, then violet, then blue so deep it almost swallows the land. Stars begin to flicker into being. In the stillness, You think not of pharaohs or gods, but of clipboards and checklists, ancient ones, perhaps but powerful all the same, because the pyramid, for all its majesty, is also a monument to paperwork. And maybe that's the real miracle. Dawn once more. A pale line of light creeps over the horizon, and for a moment, the desert is hushed in that magical silence between night and movement. But not for long. Ropes are lifted, shovels scrape. The day begins again, and you walk with it this time toward the quarry itself. Where the pyramid's bones are still being cut from the earth, it's farther from the pyramid than you expected, carved into the bedrock like a wound that never closes. The terrain here is jagged, uneven, and bathed in the dust of centuries. As you approach, the sound changes not voices, not footfalls, but rhythm. Sharp cracks echo across the rock, each one deliberate, controlled, repetitive. You step closer and see men crouched beside enormous blocks of limestone, pounding at them with black dolerite balls, smooth and round like river stones, but heavy enough to bruise a knee if dropped. These are the quarries that birthed the pyramids, and the men who work here are not anonymous to each other. They know every groove in this stone, every fracture line. Their movements are almost hypnotic rays. Strike, chip, over and over. The goal is to weaken a seam, not to split it all at once. The process is long, days, sometimes weeks, for a single block. You try lifting one of the dolerite stones yourself. It's heavier than it looks, and when you strike the limestone, the vibration climbs all the way up your arm. No wonder the workers rotate often. No wonder their wrists are wrapped in cloth. Still, they keep going, undeterred. It's a strange kind of patience, one that lives in the body as much as the mind. Nearby, a group prepares a completed block for transport. Wooden sledges are greased with animal fat and lined with bundled reeds to help reduce friction. A small team uses copper chisels to trim the block's edges, shaving just enough to ensure it fits into the alignment already waiting on the pyramid. You follow the team as they begin to move the stone. It's not a mad rush, more like a controlled shuffle. A lead man calls out pacing cues while others pull. The ground is dampened again with water to ease the slide. They move together like a single organism, feet adjusting, muscles straining, ropes tightening in sync. And then the sledge hits a rut. The stone jolts. A sharp crack rings out as one of the wood runners splinters, and the group stops instantly. No shouting, just a pause. You watch as one worker steps forward, kneels down, and inspects the damage. Within minutes, 2 others join him. They measure the break, nod, and send the boy the same 10-year-old errand runner you saw yesterday sprinting back to the repair tent. You sit down on a nearby rock, watching the scene. There's no panic, no blame. Just response, action, repair. This is the rhythm that built the pyramids. Not magic, not mystery, just an endless loop of movement, adjustment, and persistence. As you wait, your eyes drift to the horizon. There, in the shimmering distance, the Nile cuts through the landscape like a silver thread. It isn't just a river, it's the artery of Egypt. Most of the supplies used in this project came from boats navigating that water. You remember reading somewhere that the ancient Egyptians timed construction cycles with the flooding of the Nile, when agriculture slowed and manpower became available. Farming paused. Building began. Soon, the boy returns, cradling a replacement beam over his shoulder. The others cheer gently, not boisterous, but grateful. The repair is quick. Within minutes, the sledge is rolling again. You walk alongside it, noting the footprints left in the damp sand, the grooves etched by effort. When the block is finally handed off to the pyramid crew, you let the team go and linger a moment longer by the quarry. It's quieter now. A few workers rest under makeshift tents of woven reeds, sipping water, wiping grit from their eyes. One gestures toward the horizon and makes a joke something about how many blocks are left to cut. The others laugh and groan. The answer, clearly, is too many. You wander back toward the camp alone, cutting across the base of the pyramid. The closer you get, the more remarkable it becomes. You see the alignment, the way each stone fits perfectly into the next. You notice how the base is precisely leveled across its enormous surface. That's not an accident. That's surveying. That's geometric planning so refined, it challenges even modern methods. Historians still argue over how they achieved it. Some suggest long water trenches were used to gauge flatness, letting the surface of still water guide adjustments. Others argue for sight lines, strings, or even solar shadows. But no matter how it was done, the result is the same astonishingly level. Even today, you walk the base perimeter, tracing the scale with your own steps. Every few yards, you see red ochre marks, guidelines from ancient engineers, still clinging to the stone. They didn't fade completely. Nothing ever does here. One section is different. A group of men surrounds a collapsed corner, whispering. A stone is shifted just slightly, but enough to draw concern. You watch as they examine the joint, probe the gap, and discuss repairs. One man gestures with his hands, describing a wedge that could stabilize the seam. You realize then, even now, this pyramid is learning, adapting, correcting. It's not frozen in perfection. It's alive in its own way, a structure built not just to endure, but to be maintained, to evolve. That thought stays with you as you return to the village for the evening meal. The light is fading fast now, and the fire pits glow brighter than before. You join a circle of workers sitting on stones, eating roasted onions and bread dipped in oil. The conversation flows easily. Someone tells a story, half joke, half memory, about a block that almost crushed the foreman's lunch. Laughter erupts. The foreman, sitting nearby, rolls his eyes but smiles anyway. You glance around the circle and think about all that has passed through these hands, every groove carved, every sled pulled, every beam replaced. The monument may carry the pharaoh's name, but these people, these quiet hands, shaped it, and tomorrow they'll do it again. The next morning greets you with the low murmur of tools being sorted and fire pits rekindled. But today, you take a different path, not toward the quarry or the foreman's tent, or even the pyramid's looming base. Instead, you follow a group heading away from the main site, toward a slightly elevated ridge where the light glints not off stone, but off something more fragile, fragments of pottery, bone, and burial markers half consumed by sand. This is the workers' cemetery. It's quieter here, not solemn exactly, but still, the kind of quiet that feels respectful rather than empty. You walk along rows of simple graves, some barely visible now. The stone markers are low, weather-worn, and carved with symbols an eye here, a bundle of reeds there, and occasionally a name written in shaky hieroglyphs. No golden coffins, no scarabs tucked into folded arms, just dignity. You kneel beside one and brush away a thin veil of dust. The inscription is faded, but the curve of it feels deliberate. Someone took the time. Someone remembered. This cemetery wasn't discovered until the 1990s. Until then, many still clung to the myth that slaves built the pyramids and were discarded when they died, buried hastily, if at all. But these graves changed that. The workers were not just valued in life, but also in death. Some were buried with modest offerings, a cup of beer, a loaf of bread, a small carving of a cat or a falcon. Their backs may have been bent from labor, but their burial says something different. They belonged. You walk further and meet a team of archaeologists quietly working through one section of the site. Their tools are modern small brushes, trowels, sieves, but their patience feels ancient. They're excavating the bones of a man who died in his 30s. His skeleton shows signs of arthritis in the knees, a compressed spine, and a shattered collarbone that partially healed clear signs of years of hard labor. But there's also evidence of care the break was set. The man lived on. Someone tended to him. Historians still debate whether this was universal or exceptional, whether all workers were treated with such regard, or only a few. But even one grave like this shatters the old narrative. It means there was room for compassion, even in the shadow of something so enormous. You glance up from the grave, and in the distance, the pyramid looms its silhouette sharp against the morning sun. The workers buried here would have seen that view too. Perhaps that's why the cemetery was built here, so they could rest eternally with the monument they helped create in sight. Not many people get that kind of legacy. You walk a little farther and find a particularly striking grave, its headstone shaped with more care than most. A small carving sits at its base, an ibex, perhaps, or a goat. A woman kneels nearby, hands pressed together, lips moving silently. She's not part of the crew. She's local, and she's here every week, brushing off the dust, leaving flowers made from reeds. When you approach, she explains in a whisper that this was her great-great-something grandfather, or at least, she likes to believe so. There's no way to prove it. But belief, you think, might be enough. She smiles and pats the ground before leaving, sandals whispering over sand. You stay a while longer, sitting beside the grave, trying to imagine what this man's voice sounded like. Whether he told jokes, whether he ever looked up at the blocks he hauled and thought, "This will still be here when I'm gone." Eventually, the sun climbs higher, and the heat becomes sharp. You make your way back toward the village, where the morning bustle has fully returned. Bread is baking, tools are clinking, and a familiar voice is calling for more water near the ramp. The rhythm continues. You pass by the foreman's tent and notice a new diagram being sketched in the dust today's alignment measurements. A worker crouches with a string line stretched tight between two blocks. Another places a small copper weight at the midpoint. It swings gently, and everyone watches its motion until it settles. That's the spot. That's where the next layer will go. You follow this measuring process up the side of the pyramid where a new section is being prepared. The higher they go, the trickier the logistics become. No cranes, no pulleys, just ramps, grit, and teamwork. And then, something curious happens. You notice a man with a large brush not sweeping sand, but cleaning a surface of the stone itself. He motions for you to come closer, then reveals what he's uncovering: red paint. At first, it looks like nothing a stain. Maybe, but then the pattern becomes clear. It's a hieroglyph, then another. You're not in a sacred chamber. You're not in a tomb. You're in a crawl space beneath the king's chamber. And yet, someone wrote their name here. In ancient Egypt, workers often marked their contributions with informal graffiti notes to each other, inside jokes, sometimes even political statements. And here, carved in ochre, is a crew named the Drunkards of Menkor. You laugh. It's not just a joke, it's history. Graffiti like this has been found throughout pyramid sites, hidden in crawl spaces, corridors, behind panels never meant to be opened. These weren't messages to the gods, they were messages to each other. Proof that someone was here, that someone was proud. You run your fingers lightly across the painted line, and a strange feeling stirs in your chest connection. Maybe a reminder that history isn't made by ideas alone, but by people leaving fingerprints wherever they go. Above you, more stones are being placed. The hammering resumes. The sun climbs. But you remain for a while, crouched there beside that red paint, smiling at the thought that someone, 4,000 years ago, wanted to be remembered for a job well done, and maybe a little bit of mischief, too. You rise and walk back toward the base of the pyramid, where fresh blocks are being stacked. A foreman barks a number, someone else repeats it. The rope crew adjusts, the chant resumes. And as you step away, you hear one final thing, faint but unmistakable. Laughter, even here, especially here. As you make your way back down from the crawl space, leaving the graffiti and the gentle echo of laughter behind, you realize something has shifted. Not in the air, it's still warm and dry, still filled with the tap-tap-tap of chisels and the murmur of distant work, but in your understanding. The pyramid is no longer a cold, distant mystery. It feels personal now, lived in, human. You pass a crew gathered under a canopy of linen tied between two wooden poles. They're seated around a large block of limestone, which lies half-finished in the sand like a sleeping beast. One man runs a copper chisel along a marked line, then carefully lifts it to inspect the edge. Another dips a reed brush into red ochre and touches up a guideline that has faded in the sun. You pause to watch. The care is almost surgical. These aren't unthinking laborers blindly swinging hammers. These are artisans engineers in linen tunics using math, memory, and muscle in perfect concert. The block must fit just right. Not approximately, precisely. If it's even slightly off, the cumulative error could ruin the alignment above. One of the older men looks up, notices your attention, and gestures for you to sit. He smiles as if to say, "Yes, it's impressive, but it's also just Tuesday." You take a seat nearby, resting in the thin shade. A younger worker begins telling a story as he sharpens a blade. He speaks of a day when a crane falcon nested near the site, and how the workers took it as a good omen except for one superstitious scribe who insisted it meant delays. We finished ahead of schedule that week. He laughs, just to prove him wrong. Everyone chuckles. The blade makes a clean, soft scrape as it glides across stone. The conversation drifts toward other details, what the priests said in the last ritual. Which beer was too sour? Who snores the loudest in the sleep tents? You half expect them to bring up the weather next. It's astonishing how ordinary greatness can feel when you live inside it every day. The sun climbs higher, and work resumes. This time, you follow a team assigned to a different part of the structure, one that requires a more subtle touch. Not every stone is massive. Some are thin-facing stones, cut with a fineness that allows them to slide into gaps like puzzle pieces. These casing stones, when polished, were what gave the pyramid its legendary smooth, gleaming exterior. You watch as a worker rubs a limestone panel with a piece of fine sandstone, creating a surface so smooth it reflects sunlight like a mirror. A second man checks the angles using a square carved from wood and lined with string. Tiny adjustments are made, corners shaved, edges beveled. The goal is not strength, but grace. These stones once covered the entire structure, making it shine white under the desert sun. Today, most of them are gone stripped over centuries by other builders, earthquakes, or time itself. But here and there, a few remain in place. You run your fingers across one now, and it's so cool, so smooth. You wonder if the stone remembers the hands that first shaped it. You linger, absorbing the contrast, rough blocks within, gleaming skin without. It's easy to forget that perfection is often a matter of perspective. Up close, there are gaps, chips, stains from rain and handprints. But from a distance from the Nile, the pyramid must have looked like a beam of frozen moonlight. Historians still argue about whether these casing stones were meant to impress the gods or simply the people. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe it was just part of the dream, a pyramid that caught the light like a celestial stairway. Later that afternoon, you join a small crew headed to the southern edge of the site. They're clearing a foundation for what appears to be a smaller satellite pyramid, likely one for a queen or a favored royal. It's less well-preserved than Khufu's behemoth, but still powerful in form. Its angles, though eroded, still rise with intention. And the techniques being used here are nearly identical: level the ground, align the corners to the stars, haul, cut, smooth, repeat. One of the workers taps a measuring stick against the base and turns to speak. Same sky, different king, he jokes, but the stones don't care. You smile. It's true. The stars these builders used for alignment haven't changed. Orion still watches overhead, and Sirius still heralds the flooding of the Nile. Their methods using star risings to align the base were precise, to within a fraction of a degree. They didn't have telescopes, just patience, and eyes trained to see the heavens as blueprints. You sit and watch the sun edge lower, casting long shadows across the dust. Everything stretches. Time, light, even memory. You make your way back toward the Great Pyramid, where work is winding down. The crews are gathering tools, tying ropes, wiping sweat from their foreheads. The beer is being passed around again, not as celebration, but as sustenance. Bread is broken. Fingers are licked clean. Someone sings. The notes float up, light and slow. As the fire pits are lit for dinner, a breeze carries the scent of roasted garlic and grain. You follow it back to the heart of the workers' village, where the rhythm of domestic life resumes. Pots bubble, laughter flickers, and the same stories are told again and again, each time with a little more flair. You sit beside a low wall, nibbling on a crust of bread offered by a boy no older than 12. His teeth are stained with herbs, and his eyes are wide with curiosity. You ask him what he wants to be when he grows up. He shrugs. Stonecutter, maybe, or beer maker. Like my uncle. He grins. But maybe priest. They don't carry anything. You laugh softly, and he joins in, then darts off to chase his sister around a jug of water. You watch them disappear into the shadows, their silhouettes sharp against the firelight. The pyramid still stands in the distance, lit now only by stars. And you begin to understand the stones may be ancient, but the people who placed them lived lives just like ours, full of jokes, meals, music, doubts, pride, and that is what really holds the pyramid together. The night deepens, and the stars multiply. You lie awake for a while on a woven mat near the village edge, listening to the low hum of conversation fading into quiet. Crickets chirp, the firewood crackles, and somewhere, someone snores like a steady drumbeat. It's peaceful, soft, grounding. But you can't help wondering, how did all of this work so well? How did a society, thousands of years ago, coordinate something so massive, with no engines, no computers, and no modern tools? The answer, as you'll find the next morning, lies not just in effort, but in structure. You rise early, again, following the scent of bread and the sound of footsteps. This time, you visit the administrative quarter, an area tucked between the workers' camp and the river docks. It's here that supply routes are managed. Payroll is documented, and delivery schedules are carved in ink and clay. And at the center of it all are the overseers, the project managers of the ancient world. You watch one now. A man draped in a tunic dyed slightly darker than the others, seated on a low stool beside a slab of limestone used like a desk. A roll of papyrus stretches across his lap. On it, rows of hieroglyphic symbols, carefully inked, tallying work units. Each laborer is grouped under a team leader, and each team is credited for their block quota completed or not. Miss the quota, and your team might be rotated off the site, exceed it, and you might earn extra beer, more rations, or a favored posting on tomorrow's shift. It's as much about motivation as it is about measurement. Beside the overseer sits a young scribe, reading numbers aloud while marking fresh deliveries from the Nile barge's copper tools. Fresh barley, goat skins, and jars of oil. The copper, in particular, is rationed tightly. Each chisel wears down fast against stone. You hear the overseer grumble one shipment is late. That means crews will have to reuse old chisels longer, risking breaks or imperfect cuts. Even here, delays ripple like water. You walk to the docks, curious to see this Nile artery yourself. And there it is, glinting in the morning light, wide and slow and utterly essential. A boat has just arrived, and men leap from the vessel to tie it off. Amphorae of beer, crates of lentils, ropes, and even bundles of reeds are lifted onto carts and rolled up the sandy slope. Each cart has a tag painted in black on thin shims of wood, indicating the recipient crew and destination site. A tall woman steps forward, checking the tags against her record tablet. She's one of the logistics coordinators, and she moves like someone who commands attention without raising her voice. Her eyes scan quickly, and when she spots a mislabeled cart, she waves her hand sharply. The driver stops immediately, adjusts the tag, and proceeds. No yelling, no panic, just order. Quiet, practiced order. You follow one of the carts to the storage tents, where supplies are sorted and redistributed by crew. One area contains nothing but onions, another holds jugs of date wine, another carefully shaded stores copper tools under linen to keep them from overheating in the sun. Every item has its place. As you walk, you start to see how interconnected the system truly is. A delay in the quarry slows stone cutting. A late food shipment weakens morale. A broken chisel can stall an entire team. Yet somehow they adapt, patch the tools, ration the meals, reassign the laborers. This isn't just a construction site, it's an organism, alive, adjusting, constantly recalibrating. Historians still argue how centralized Pharaoh's oversight was. Was this operation controlled directly from the palace, or managed locally with only periodic royal supervision? The truth, you suspect, is a mix of both. Pharaoh may have decreed the vision, but it was these on-the-ground systems crews, quotas, scribes that turned vision into stone. You move next to a long rectangular tent flanked by 2 guards. Inside is something rarer, the stone plans. These are large slabs, laid flat and engraved with etchings in red and black blueprints. In essence, not quite to scale, but rich in detail. You see the outlines of the chambers, the shafts, the entrance passage. You see angle notations, tiny marks indicating where specific stone types are required, white limestone for the casing, pink granite for the king's chamber, basalt for the floor. An older man is teaching an apprentice how to read them. He runs a finger along one corridor and explains slowly, gently, that this shaft must tilt precisely to catch a certain star's light on a specific night of the year. The boy's eyes widen. To guide the soul, he asks. The man nods. That's the idea. You step outside and realize how elegantly belief and practicality blend here. The pyramids weren't just built to last, they were built to mean something. Every chamber, every corridor, every angle wasn't just functional, it was sacred, aligned with stars, designed to elevate the soul. You walk back through the site with new eyes, past the chiselers, the haulers, the planners, the cooks, past the worn stones and the smooth ones. past the children chasing each other with palm fronds, and the elders sitting in quiet circles sipping beer from chipped mugs. And you begin to see something invisible, but everywhere. Trust, not in the modern sense, contracts, paperwork, laws, but in the more human sense. A trust that if you did your job, others would do theirs. That if the grain arrived, someone would bake it. If the stone was cut, someone would move it. If you got sick, someone would cover your shift. That if you died, someone would bury you with honor and maybe remember your name. This trust is what built the pyramids. Not aliens, not magic, just people holding up their end of the bargain. As the sun begins to set, you sit by the riverbank and dip your hand in the Nile. The water is cool, slow-moving, filled with silt that has fed empires. Boats glide by in the golden light, sails puffing in the wind, crews waving lazily as they pass. One child shouts a greeting, and you wave back, behind you. The pyramid catches the last light of day. Its edges burn with gold for a few moments, then soften into shadow. You sit a while longer, letting that image burn into your mind. The Nile, the stone, the system, the trust. As evening drapes the land in hues of violet and rust, the pyramid's silhouette stands firm, quiet but never still. You walk back from the river with sand clinging to your feet, and the sensation that you're moving through something more than a place. You're walking through time. Tonight, instead of heading straight to the fires and laughter of the village, your path leads you toward a place many pass without noticing, a narrow path that curves around the edge of the construction site and dips into the earth. You've heard the workers speak of it in hushed tones, the burial shaft. Not the king's tomb, but the one for them. The descent is steep but manageable, cut with the same precision that marks everything in this land. Torches line the upper walls, and the air grows cooler as you descend. A low hum follows you, distant voices, the sound of sandals scraping stone, and beneath it all, silence, sacred silence. You reach the bottom and step into a small chamber, not opulent, not grand, but deeply human. Along the walls are niches carved into limestone, each containing burial bundles. No gold here, no elaborate paintings or towering statues, just linen-wrapped remains, tucked in with small offerings, jars of beer, bread loaves hardened with time, a carved wooden bird. You stand still, unsure if you should breathe too loudly. One figure lies on a raised slab near the center of the room. The wrapping is loose at the shoulders, and you can make out the collarbones thin, weathered, fragile. But beside the body rests a finely made flint knife, and at its feet sits a sealed jar with a name scrawled in red ink. Penty. You whisper it aloud. Barely. A man who likely worked the ramps or the quarry. Maybe both. Someone who carried stone until he couldn't anymore. Who slept in the dust, drank his ration, laughed at jokes, and watched the pyramid climb into the sky one course at a time. You feel a strange ache, a mix of sadness and awe. So many lives poured into this place. Not buried beneath it, but around it, beside it, within its reach. This isn't a monument to a pharaoh. It's a collective tombstone for thousands. And somehow, that feels more sacred. You leave the chamber quietly, taking the slope back up to the surface. The wind greets you with a whisper, stirring your tunic and reminding you that the desert never fully sleeps. You pause at the top, looking back once before continuing toward the village. Along the way, you pass one of the storage areas, a squat, stone-walled structure where damaged tools are logged and sorted. But something draws your attention. A foreman stands beside a broken block, gesturing to a boy who's maybe 13 at most. The block has cracked diagonally, and the young worker looks as if the sky has fallen. His hands shake, his lip trembles, and he keeps apologizing. The foreman listens quietly. Then he crouches, draws a line in the sand, and explains not with anger, but with calm that the block was flawed from the start. It wasn't the boy's fault. He pats the child's shoulder and tells him to rest, to try again tomorrow. The boy nods. And for the first time since you arrived, you see someone cry, not from pain, but relief. There's compassion here. It runs alongside precision, alongside discipline and quota. You arrive at the heart of the camp just as dinner is finishing. Tonight's meal includes figs rare, sweet, and split open like blooming flowers. A few children are running a race around the fire pit while their parents call warnings about the sharp rocks. Someone strums a lyre, off-key but lovely. A man you haven't met before offers you a seat and a clay cup filled with a warm herbal brew. He tells you he's part of the cleanup crew, the team that comes through after every shift to sweep, collect scraps, sharpen tools, and tidy up for the next day. We don't build the pyramid, he says with a wink. We just make sure no one trips over it. You both laugh. But his tone shifts after a moment, growing more reflective. He says there's a story that passes around the village sometimes, about the day when the last stone is placed when the top finally touches the sky. On that day, the workers believe they'll be allowed to climb to the very top and sit with the gods, just for a moment, just to say they made it. Do you believe it, you ask? He shrugs. Doesn't matter. Thinking about it helps the heavy days feel lighter. You sip the tea and savor its warmth. Around you, people begin to drift toward their sleeping quarters, some curling up in small huts, others stretching out under the open sky. There's no ceremony to it, just sleep, when the body demands it. But a few remain awake, gathered around a circle of coals. One older woman leans forward and begins to speak a story. It seems the group hushes. Even the wind seems to still. She tells of a time before the pharaoh, before pyramids, when gods walked the earth in feathers and light. She speaks of a bird who flew too high and scorched her wings, falling into the desert. Where she landed, a temple grew not from magic, but from hands, human hands, who knew the bird's story and wanted it remembered. You sit quietly, letting the words settle. Because isn't that what the pyramid really is? A story in stone? Not just about the king who ordered it, but about the thousands who built it. About their hopes, their failures, their dreams and mistakes and clever fixes and quiet glories. A monument not just to divinity, but to humanity. You close your eyes for a moment and listen to the crackle of embers. Someone begins to hum, the kind of sound that has no melody but feels like home anyway. The pyramid stands just beyond the camp, hidden now in darkness, but no less present. Its shadow stretches over the land like a watchful hand. You lie back on the sand, the stars above brighter than ever, and for the first time, you don't see mystery in their flicker. You see memory. The wind picks up just before dawn, carrying the faint scent of the Nile and stirring the edges of your blanket. You sit up slowly, blinking sleep from your eyes as the stars begin to fade into the pale gray of morning. Around you, the village stirs first a cough, then the rustle of mats, then quiet voices greeting the day. Someone stokes a fire. Someone else yawns so loudly it makes a donkey bray from the nearby pen. You stretch and rise with the others, part of the flow now, no longer just a visitor. You pass a woman pouring water from a clay jug into a basin. She catches your eye, gives a nod, and gestures for you to wash. The water is cold, sharp against your skin, but it wakes you fully. The kind of waking that feels ancient, clean, and new. Today, you head toward the mid-level scaffolding of the pyramid the transitional space where the chaos of ground-level logistics gives way to higher-order planning. It's where the structure narrows, the ramps get steeper, and the work becomes more delicate. You climb slowly, following a narrow ledge of compacted rubble that curves gently around the base like a spiral. As you ascend, you begin to notice something strange: silence. Not the absence of sound, but a different kind of quiet, focused, controlled. Here, shouts are replaced by hand signals. Workers speak in gestures. The blocks being placed are smaller now, lighter, but they require more finesse. Precision is everything. You reach a platform where two crews are aligning casing stones, those outer, smooth blocks that once made the pyramid shimmer. One man crouches low, brushing fine sand away from the contact points, while another taps gently with a wooden mallet. A foreman crouches beside them, using a plumb bob a string with a small stone weight to ensure the alignment is true. The line hangs perfectly still. When the block settles into place, there's a moment of pause. Then a nod. And just like that, another piece of the structure clicks into history. You watch in awe. There's no celebration, no cheer, just the quiet satisfaction of doing something right. And again, one worker, his face creased from sun and time, catches your gaze. He smiles faintly and says, "You don't have to see the whole pyramid to build your part." Then he turns back to his task. You sit nearby and let the phrase echo in your mind. Down below, workers still haul stone, mix mortar, take inventory, and cook. Up here, others align edges to the stars. Everyone plays a part. And none of them, not one, can see the entire pyramid as it will one day stand. They build it by faith, by math, by memory, and by trust. You glance down the side and spot the glint of the Nile in the far distance. It feels like a vein running through everything. Boats still arrive daily. Resources still flow in. Information still travels from foremen to planners to workers like water through the reeds. Later that day, you walk with a stonemason to the temple complex being built beside the pyramid, a place where rituals will take place after the pharaoh's burial. The temple is not as tall, but it's no less precise. It's oriented with exactness, aligned with solstices and celestial markers. Each pillar is shaped and placed to create symmetry between light and shadow, between movement and stillness. Inside, the walls are already being carved. You run your hands over a half-finished relief showing the pharaoh making offerings to the gods. But tucked into a corner, you spot something different, a smaller carving, almost an afterthought. A man holding a chisel. No name, no crown, just a figure in mid-motion, hammer raised. An artist's joke. The mason explains, a little self-portrait. You smile. He's carving eternity and signing it with a whisper. As the sun begins to fall again, you return to the pyramid, this time to a newer addition being prepared, the king's burial chamber. It's hidden deep within the structure, sealed from view. You walk through corridors still under construction, their walls smooth but unadorned. The passage narrows, grows darker. Then you reach the chamber. It's a single room, massive in feel but not in decoration. The walls are bare. The ceiling is constructed from massive granite beams, each weighing more than 50 tons. They sit layered above each other, designed to distribute weight and prevent collapse. The engineering is brilliant, so much so that it wouldn't be matched again for centuries. And yet, standing here, what strikes you is not the architecture, but the silence. This is where the pharaoh will rest. Not in gold, not in ceremony, but in stillness, surrounded by stone, wrapped in the work of thousands. Historians still argue about how this chamber was constructed. The size of the blocks, the method of their placement, the lack of inscriptions. Some call it mysterious, others call it practical. But in this moment, it feels like a pause, a breath, a place meant not to dazzle, but to hold. You sit on the cold floor for a long time, listening, thinking, not just about the pharaoh, but about the people who built this space, who dragged these beams, aligned these walls, braced these ceilings, and then stepped away quietly, never to be named. As you walk out of the chamber and into the fading light, something inside you shifts. You no longer see the pyramid as a monument to one man. You see it as a monument to time, to labor, to unity. Back outside, the evening wind dances across the stone. The workers are finishing their final tasks. One last block is slid into place. A final tally is made. A torch is lit. And the pyramid, ever growing, ever steady, begins to glow in the amber of sunset. You walk slowly back toward the village. A woman hands you a small token, an amulet shaped like a beetle. "For the journey," she says simply, "so you don't forget." You press it into your palm. It's warm from her hand. The fires are already burning as you arrive. The evening meal is quiet tonight, almost reverent. People eat in silence or speak in low voices. The air is cooler, and a hush seems to have settled over everything. Maybe it's just another day, or maybe it's because the pyramid is nearly finished. You lie down near the same wall as before and look up at the stars. Orion gleams overhead, as it always has, as it always will. The pyramid rises behind you, built by hands now resting, by names mostly lost, by lives lived in dust and light. And somehow, you feel it, not just the weight of stone, but the weight of meaning. The next day begins not with the usual shuffle of feet and clang of tools, but with a strange stillness, like the whole site is holding its breath. You wake before the first light reaches the horizon, stirred by murmurs and soft footfalls moving in one direction. You follow them instinctively, drawn toward the ramp that leads to the very peak of the pyramid. Today, the final block is to be placed. You climb slowly, behind a column of workers and overseers, priests and planners. Some are carrying offerings, bundles of herbs, small carved figures, pieces of cloth dyed in sacred colors. Others carry nothing at all, their hands folded respectfully, as if this were a ceremony. And in many ways, it is. You reach the upper levels just as the first blush of sunlight touches the eastern horizon. The workers assigned to the final lift are already in position. Ropes coiled, arms bare and ready. The stone itself a polished white limestone block. Smaller than many others, but no less significant, rests on a sled lined with woven reeds. It will not be easy. Though the ramp has narrowed and steepened, and the weight of the block is less than those placed at the base, the difficulty is greater up here. Every movement must be exact. Every misstep risks not just a crack, but catastrophe. But the workers don't hesitate. They've been chosen not for strength, but for precision, for trust. The ropes tighten. The chant begins low and rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. You can feel it in your chest, steady and slow. The stone slides forward, inch by inch. Foremen walk alongside, watching, correcting, breathing with the team. You step aside as it passes, close enough to touch, but you don't. No one does. This block is more than stone now. It's a symbol, not of power, but of completion. It reaches the top platform just as the sun breaks free of the horizon. The workers pause, not from exhaustion, but reverence. The lead foreman approaches, adjusts the block by hand, and places a small copper tool beneath it. Not to hold it, but to bless it. A gift from labor to labor. Then, with a gentle push, the final stone slides into its place, A silence follows, a deep one. No cheering, no celebration, just breath, shared, still, holy. You sit on the ledge, watching as the workers step back, some with smiles, some with tears. A few bow their heads. One man looks up at the sky and whispers something to a god whose name you can't quite hear. And just like that, the pyramid is finished. Well, almost. There's still cleanup. Still plastering, polishing, preparing the temple below. But the body of it, the structure, the spine, it's whole now. You descend slowly, taking a winding path along the outer slope. From above, the pyramid looks different more than massive. It looks impossible. And yet, there it stands. Not because of one man's will, but because thousands believed it was worth trying. And trying. And trying again. As you reach the base, you spot a familiar face, the young boy who'd cried over the broken block. He's seated beside a fire, roasting a date over the flame and grinning with pride. I helped carry the last stone, he tells you, barely able to sit still. Only for a minute. But I did. You smile and take a seat beside him. Later, you wander back to the temple site, where the finishing touches are underway. You pass a team carving a series of scenes into the outer walls. One shows the pharaoh seated on a throne, hands outstretched toward the gods. Another shows offerings of grain and incense. But tucked away in a bottom corner, almost hidden, is a different image workers hauling a sled, sweat pouring from their brows, faces focused, feet digging into the sand. No crowns, no halos, just effort. You trace the lines with your fingers, wondering who carved them and why they were allowed to remain. Maybe no one noticed, or maybe someone powerful did and let it stay. That night, the village hosts a feast. Not a grand one, there are no fireworks, no musicians, but a shared meal, spread across many fires, full of laughter and quiet pride. The air smells of garlic and meat. Someone roasts chickpeas until they pop, and the children squeal every time one escapes the pan. You sit with the crew, from the upper tiers, the ones who aligned the casing stones and placed the final blocks. They talk about the slope, the wind, how one of the ropes nearly snapped, how another worker saved it with a knot at the last second. They laugh, tease, recount. It feels like any construction crew celebrating a job well done. But underneath it, there's something deeper. Not just pride in the work, but pride in each other. You look around the circle and realize something. None of these people will be remembered by name. Not in scrolls, not in temples, not in golden sarcophagi. But the pyramid remembers them. Every chisel mark, every grain of mortar, every small decision, every adjustment, every bruise and blister, that's their story, told in stone. Historians still argue about who really built the pyramids. Was it slaves? Was it conscripts? Was it some unknown civilization? You know better now. It was people, ordinary, extraordinary people, who worked with their hands and their minds, who endured heat and hunger and aching feet, and who, at the end of each day, looked up at what they'd made and said, "We are part of this." And they were. You finish your meal slowly, savoring the taste. A woman brings over a bundle wrapped in linen and places it in your lap. Inside is a single, smoothed stone carved into a perfect cube. "Souvenir," she says, "from the base layer. One of the first." You hold it, marveling at its weight. Not heavy, but solid. Real. Proof. Later that night, you return to your mat, lying flat beneath the stars. You can't see the pyramid from here. It's hidden behind the huts, the stores, the fires. But you feel it. Its presence, its patience. A monument, yes, but also a memory of effort, of trust, of hands. The morning after the feast arrives, soft and golden, as though the sun itself is tired, rising slowly after the weight of what has been completed. You stretch beneath the linen canopy of your sleeping space. The cube of stone still resting beside you, where you tucked it in the night. When you hold it again, it feels heavier somehow, not physically, but emotionally. You wonder how many others have carried home a piece of something bigger, not to show off, but simply to remember. Today, there is no hauling, no carving, no chanting rhythms echoing up the ramp. The tools are quiet. The sledges lie still. The pyramid is finished. Instead, you follow a procession moving slowly toward the Valley Temple, the ceremonial heart of this entire complex. It's where the pharaoh's body will one day arrive, ferried up from the Nile, cleansed, perfumed, and blessed before entering the long tunnel to his eternal house. But today, there is no funeral, just preparation, consecration, the final inspection of a sacred path built by mortal hands. The floor of the temple gleams underfoot, a mosaic of polished basalt stones fitted so tightly that not even a blade of grass could slip between them. You walk the path barefoot, as others do, and feel the subtle warmth of the stones already soaking in the morning sun. On either side of the temple, columns rise like trees, tall, thick, smooth. Each one tells a story in faint relief: a boat on the Nile, a lion's hunt, a coronation, an eclipse. They are not elaborate, not overworked, just symbols carved by hands that understood restraint. You run your fingers across one column's base and feel the grooves still sharp. Not because the stone resists time, but because the work was that precise. At the end of the walkway, you step into the sanctum, an open space where the statue of Khufu will eventually sit. For now, it's empty, quiet, but not lifeless. You hear the soft footsteps of a priest circling the room, scattering incense powder on the floor. He does not speak, and you do not ask. Some rituals require silence. You sit on the temple's stone bench as the sun climbs higher. People come and go: engineers, foremen, cooks, scribes. No one stays long. They each pass through with a look that's hard to name: awe, maybe, or gratitude, maybe just closure. You overhear one man say, "We built it with our backs, but it belongs to all of us." It lingers with you as you step outside again, squinting into the light. The rest of the day drifts like smoke. You visit the canal that once led from the Nile to the foot of the complex, now slowly silting over. You watch children play beside it, skipping stones that once ferried cargo and granite. You see women mending garments, men preparing new storage rooms for temple offerings, teenagers practicing lifting techniques with sticks and pots as if auditioning for the next great project. Because this may be the end of a pyramid, but it is not the end of building. Egypt, you understand now, never truly stops. It moves like the river, sometimes fast, sometimes imperceptible, but always flowing. You spend the afternoon helping grind grain in one of the communal huts, your hands turning the stone again and again, feeling the rhythm that must have shaped generations. You're clumsy at first, but then your movements begin to align with the others, circular, steady, smooth. A woman next to you gives an approving grunt. "You're learning," she says. "Slower than my daughter, but not the worst." You both laugh. After the sun begins to dip, you walk back toward the base of the pyramid, alone this time, needing to see it one more time before darkness falls. Its shadow stretches long over the sand, cool and massive, a quiet promise to the sky. You walk the perimeter slowly, pausing to touch the lower stones, now weathered with faint chips and wind marks. Some still bear the ochre lines, the faded brush strokes of measurements long since fulfilled. At one corner, you find a cluster of faint etchings, crew names again, some clear, others smudged with time. you spot the now familiar Friends of Khufu, and next to it, scratched in almost childlike handwriting, I carried the rope. You smile. No throne, no gold mask, just a sentence, a statement of belonging. You sit on a stone near the southeast edge and close your eyes. In the wind, you hear echoes of all the sounds that once filled this place, the clack of tools, the laughter at the cook fires, the hiss of wet sand under heavy sledges, the sharp whistle of a foreman calling alignment. And under all of it, the chant, that deep, steady human chant that meant work was being done. Historians still argue over how long it took. 20 years, 30. No one is certain, but what is certain, what you now know in your bones, is that every moment of it was real, not abstract, not mythical, lived. The stars come out one by one as you linger, unmoving, watching the night reclaim the desert. The pyramid shifts from white to gray to black, but it never disappears. It holds the light long after the sun has gone. Back at the village, the fires are quieter tonight. The feast is over. The project is done. What remains is calm earned and complete. You pass by the huts where workers sleep soundly, some wrapped in linen, others on open mats, the occasional hand twitching in a dream. You see no guards, no overseers, just people, resting. You find your own place again beneath the sky, lying flat, the stone cube still cradled in your hand. You look up and imagine what Khufu must have thought when he first envisioned this monument. Did he imagine grandeur, immortality? Was it about glory, or was it about control? Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. But what you know now is this. The pyramid may bear his name, but it belongs to thousands, to cooks, to children, to stonemasons and scribes, to the man who measured a shadow and the woman who baked the bread that kept him standing, to the boy who carried the rope, to the ones who stayed behind and the ones who rest below. And somehow, perhaps impossibly, it belongs to you now. 2. You awaken to stillness, no hammering, no shouting, no creak of sledges or murmurs from scribes, just the soft breath of wind over sand and the faint rustle of linen as others begin to stir. The village feels gentler today, like a body exhaling after years of holding tension in its shoulders. The pyramid is finished. There are no new blocks to cut, no deliveries to organize. Only what remains after a colossal task has finally ended reflection and the slow unwinding of routine. You rise and walk through the camp barefoot, the cool sand damp from dew. Fires are being rekindled, but they're smaller now. The meal's simpler. Conversations have shifted from planning to remembering. You catch fragments. Do you remember when the ramps flooded? He almost dropped it twice. That year the barley spoiled, and we all had to eat dried onions for a month. These are the stories that will survive. Not the official ones, the Pharaoh's decree carved into a temple wall, but these lived ones. Personal, tangible, true. You pass the edge of the site and make your way back to the workers' cemetery, pulled by something you can't quite explain. The graves feel different now, not more sacred, exactly, but more known. The names carved into stone are no longer anonymous. You imagine them walking beside you, sharing bread, adjusting ropes, swatting flies from their faces. You pause at a small, slanted marker. You don't know the name. It's faded, nearly lost. But someone remembered it once. Someone whispered it aloud. And now you do too. A breeze picks up and carries the scent of distant river reeds and something faintly sweet figs. Maybe, or burning acacia bark. You follow it back toward the storage tents, where a few teams are disassembling supply racks, taking stock of what remains. Nothing is wasted here. The copper will be reforged, the tools resharpened. Even the linen wrappings around worn rope will be peeled away and rewoven. You help for a while, stacking chipped amphorae, brushing sand from tool handles. It feels good. This tidying, like brushing the corners of a memory before putting it away with care. Nearby, a scribe carefully rolls up papyri into sealed tubes, inventories, crew tallies, food ledgers, stone counts. He dips each in wax and places them into a wooden chest, which will be stored in the temple archive. So they'll know, he says when he sees you watching. Know what you ask, that we were here, that it worked. He smiles, but there's no pride in his voice, just quiet certainty. Then he returns to his scrolls. Later that afternoon, you visit the canals one final time. The water level is low now, the seasonal floods having retreated. You stand by the reeds where boats once docked daily, unloading blocks and barley, tools and timber. The mudflats are drying, cracked and patterned like woven mats. A boy walks past, balancing a pot on his head. He stops, points to a patch of disturbed earth, and says, "Crocodile tracks." You both peer at the clawed marks together. Then he shrugs and walks off, humming a tune that rises and falls like river waves. Everything is returning to its rhythm. Not the rhythm of building, but of continuing. You pass a group of women weaving mats from palm fronds, their fingers moving quickly, almost instinctively. One offers you a reed strand to try, and you fumble through a few awkward knots before she takes it gently from your hand, redoing the section with a smile. "It's all right," she says. "Takes a lifetime." You believe her. As dusk approaches, you find yourself climbing the slope one last time. Not all the way to the top, it's too late for that, but just far enough to reach a ledge that offers a view of everything: the village, the Nile, the temple, and the pyramid casting its long, majestic shadow over it all. And you sit. You let time slow. You think of the tools worn down to nubs, the ropes that snapped and were knotted again, the blisters that became calluses, the children born and the elders buried while this monument grew stone by stone. You think of all the things you didn't expect, the jokes scratched into crawl spaces, the boy who cried over a mistake, the quiet dignity of a broken grave marker, the laughter, the meals, the stars overhead. You think of how often greatness is built not with grand declarations, but with small, steady choices made by people who may never be thanked, who may never see the whole picture, but who believe in it anyway. Historians still argue how it was all done, but here's what you know now. The pyramid wasn't just constructed. It was lived. You descend the slope as the sky turns from peach to lavender, the village lights flickering on one by one. The fires are already lit. The scent of lentils and garlic floats on the wind. You return to the same corner where your sleeping mat waits. Someone has left a folded cloth beside it, a gift, perhaps, or a farewell. You lie down slowly, the stone cube still tucked into your hand. It's smooth now, warmed by days in your pocket and nights beside your chest. You hold it close, and for a long moment, you simply breathe. Above you, the stars emerge again, familiar, ancient, the same ones the planners used to align each side of the pyramid, the same ones watched by farmers and dreamers, priests and builders, the same ones that guided hands and lifted eyes. You don't know their names, but they know yours now, because you've been part of something, not just a story, a structure. You've stood in its shadow, walked its ramp, heard its song, and when the world forgets who carved the stones or hauled the sledges, it will still stand, not as a tomb, but as a whisper in stone saying, "We were here." The final days at the site unfold like a gentle closing of a book. No sharp endings, no final trumpet, just a quiet drawing down of motion. You wake once again with the sun warming your face, but the sounds around you have changed. There are fewer footsteps now, fewer fires lit. Some of the workers have already left. their tools bundled in linen, their families walking with them down the narrow paths that lead away from the pyramid and back toward fields and villages beyond the Nile. You sit up slowly, your body now accustomed to the rhythm of the place, to the texture of sand beneath your mat, and the steady pulse of a world built by calloused hands and enduring hearts. But now it feels thinner. Not emptier, never that, but like a song reaching its last note and trailing off into silence. You walk once more to the foot of the pyramid, where a few final inspections are underway. The foremen walk quietly now, clipboards replaced by memory, calling no orders, only farewells. Some tap the stones gently as they pass, like an old friend's shoulder. Others linger, staring upward as if trying to memorize the angle of every block, the weight of what they built. You join a small group standing near the northeast corner, where the first blocks had been placed decades ago. One man runs his fingers over the weathered edge and says softly, "We started here. I was a boy. Look at it now." No one responds. They don't need to. A little farther away, a group of priests perform a short, simple ritual, nothing grand, a bowl of water, a whispered chant, a hand raised to the sun. It's not for the pharaoh, yet his burial may still be years away. It's for the place itself, a sanctification of what human effort and divine belief have built together. You sit near the ramp one last time, watching as it begins to be dismantled. Teams pry apart the limestone support beams, gathering rubble that will be reused for future projects or returned to the desert. A few boys run races along the length of the ramp before it vanishes entirely, laughing as they go, unaware that their feet are running atop the same slope that once bore stones taller than they are now. The dismantling is deliberate, respectful, no shouting, no rush, just steady work, like always. One of the engineers gestures for you to join him atop a pile of reclaimed stone, where the view opens wide across the whole plateau. It always looks bigger from a distance. He says. You nod. He reaches into his satchel and removes a narrow piece of folded linen. Inside it, a smooth piece of red granite the size of a coin. From the king's chamber, he explains. A chip that fell when we installed the ceiling. I saved it. Not for superstition. For memory. You accept it quietly, tucking it beside the limestone cube in your pouch. Later, back at the village. You see more departures. Huts are being swept clean, mats rolled up, cook fires doused for the last time. A few families linger, saying their goodbyes slowly. Children chase chickens. Elders sit with hands folded, watching the sun travel the sky one last time from this place. You help a woman carry bundles to her boat, an old wooden vessel painted with faded green along its edge. She tells you she arrived here pregnant with her second child. He's now 9 and already wants to be a stonemason like his uncle. She smiles as she says it, half proud, half worried. You understand. As the boat pushes off from the muddy bank, you stand there for a moment longer, watching the sails catch the wind, watching one life carry onward. That evening, you sit in the village square with those who remain, maybe 24 people. Someone brings out a bowl of olives. Someone else uncorks one of the last clay jugs of date wine. There's no feast this time, just quiet companionship, shared space, an ending that doesn't need to declare itself. One of the last engineers, the man who helped build the inner chambers, tells a story about the time a jackal wandered into the workers' tent and refused to leave. Another shares a memory of a friend who could always fix anything with just a strip of cloth and a smooth rock. You listen, you laugh, you remember. At some point, someone asks you what you'll do next. You pause. You don't have an answer. Not because you're uncertain, but because after witnessing something so vast, so intricate, so grounded in a rhythm deeper than time, It feels impossible to imagine the next step. Maybe I'll just walk, you say. They nod, and somehow, they understand. When the fire dies down, you return to your mat. You lie there under the stars again, your final night here, and trace the familiar constellations with your eyes. The Great Pyramid rises behind you in shadow, now whole, now quiet. The wind moves gently over the sand, and in the hush, you think of all the voices that once filled this space, all the lives folded into the stone. You close your eyes, and it feels like the pyramid is breathing with you, not as a structure, but as a presence, a testament not to one man's rule, but to collective will, to the power of repetition, of showing up, of placing one stone at a time, even when you're tired, even when no one will remember your name, because someone will remember the shape, the silence, the way it made the sky feel closer. You fall asleep with that thought wrapped around you like a blanket, and the stars keep watch, as they always have, as they always will. You wake early on your final day, the sky still painted in streaks of lavender and ash blue. The air feels different, not colder, but clearer. You sit up slowly, brushing a fine layer of sand from your clothes, and for a moment, you simply listen. There's no hammering, no footsteps crunching through gravel, no scribe's voice counting rations or tools, just the soft, living breath of the desert at rest. Around you, only a few remain. The village is nearly empty now, its woven mats rolled up, its ovens cold, its water jars empty and leaning on their sides like sleeping animals. What had been a hive of motion has become a quiet echo, not abandonment, just transition. You fold your blanket, stow the limestone cube and granite shard into your pouch, and take one last slow walk around the camp's perimeter. You pass the grinding stones worn smooth by years of hands, the tool racks now bare, the quiet spaces where fires once burned each night. And then, you turn toward the pyramid. It waits for you, not looming, not demanding, but patient, as it has always been. You walk toward it slowly, tracing the same familiar path you followed each day, now carved into your memory like grooves in stone. But this time, you don't stop at the base. Instead, you climb not far, not high, but enough to reach a ledge midway up where the view is full and the wind carries the scent of old work, dry reeds, and distant fig trees. You sit down, legs stretched in front of you, and exhale. This is the same place you'd visited days ago. Maybe weeks, it's hard to say. Time bends here. But something's changed. The pyramid is no longer a work site. It's no longer even just a tomb. It's become something more, something softer, a memory made solid. You take out the limestone cube and place it on the stone beside you. Then the granite shard. You hold them both in your hands, weighing not their mass, but their meaning. One from the base, the beginning, one from the chamber, the heart. You close your fingers around them gently, as if not to disturb their stories. Below, the temple still stands in silence. The canals reflect the shifting light. Beyond them, the green smear of the Nile Valley ripples in the heat haze. You imagine the people returning to their farms, to their lives carrying stories, scars, maybe even a piece of the pyramid in their pocket. Not just stone, but proof that they were part of something greater than themselves, that they built a world and held it together with nothing more than calloused hands and collective belief. You rise again, walk the edge of the ledge, then begin your slow descent down the face of the pyramid. You take your time, stopping every few steps to glance back, to let the angle shift. From every level, the view changes not dramatically, but subtly. and each change reminds you of something essential. Perspective is built one step at a time. At the base, you meet one of the last remaining foremen, a man whose beard has turned gray, whose knees crack audibly when he moves, but whose eyes are still sharp with clarity. "Going?" he asks, not unkindly. You nod. He doesn't ask where. He simply presses something into your hand, a strip of faded linen. "It was part of the first rope," he says. "It frayed and snapped halfway through the second season. We kept it as a lesson. Things break. You tie them again. You fold the linen carefully and place it beside the other 2 tokens. 3 fragments, each speaking in a different language. Stone, granite, thread, the story of the pyramid, in miniature. You thank him, and he nods once, then turns and walks off toward the direction of the canal, his gait slow but sure. You follow, eventually, but with one last stop, just before the edge of the site, where the dirt road begins to stretch away from the pyramid. You pause and turn back. You want to see it as they saw it, those who returned after years away, those who brought their children to point and say, "I helped build that." Those who sailed the river and spotted it in the distance, shining white under the sun. And there it is, whole, unmoving, yet filled with motion, still, yet filled with sound, silent, but never quiet, because it holds everything now: the voices, the decisions, the mistakes and repairs, the pride, the prayers, the heat, the hunger, the joy of a smooth block falling perfectly into place. It holds them all. You walk on, not toward an ending, but into continuation. The road is uneven, carved by carts and sandals and time. It winds past reeds and thickets of tamarisk trees. You stop at a bend in the path where the river glints through a gap, a boat drifting lazily with the current. You imagine hopping aboard, feeling the pull of the water, the cool spray of river wind. You imagine sailing toward the next project, the next call, the next story waiting to be carved into stone or clay or memory. And you realize the pyramid isn't the only thing built here. You were, too, not in the same way. Not with chisels or measuring lines, but piece by piece, moment by moment. Something inside you changed. You learned the shape of patience, the strength in repetition, the silence behind effort, and the deep, lasting truth that the most remarkable things in the world are not born of miracles, but of people simply showing up, every day, together. You reach the water's edge and step onto a small ferry waiting quietly. The ferryman gives a nod, unties the line, and with a soft push, you glide into the current. The land behind you doesn't shrink. Not really. It lingers. And up on the ridge, the pyramid still watches, not to guard, not to demand, just to remind. The ferry drifts downstream, its wooden hull creaking softly with the current, the rhythmic splash of the rudder slicing through the Nile's surface like a lullaby. You sit near the bow, the worn linen pouch resting on your lap, its contents heavier with meaning than with mass. The ferryman hums an old tune, tuneless, but somehow familiar. It reminds you of something ancient, something you can't quite place. Not a song, perhaps, but a feeling. As the pyramid fades into the morning haze behind you, your fingers trace the pouch's outline: limestone, granite, linen. A story told in weight and texture. You know their shape by heart now. They are no longer just relics. They are reminders, anchors to something both deeply personal and impossibly vast. The riverbanks drift by in silence. Fields stretch out green and gold, dotted with farmers bent to their work. Palm fronds sway lazily overhead. Occasionally, a heron lifts off from the water's edge, its wings dragging shadows across the shallows. The world feels slower here, And perhaps that's the point. You're leaving a place built for eternity, and eternity has its own pace. The ferryman glances at you once but says nothing. He doesn't need to. You realize, watching his hands guide the boat, that he too is part of the same rhythm, different trade, same patience, same quiet trust in repetition. You disembark at a modest dock farther south, where the reeds grow thick and the path curls inland toward a cluster of low hills. A handful of homes nestle against the slope, simple, painted in earth tones. The walls scrawled with charms and blessings in faded ink. Children peek from doorways. Chickens scatter as you pass. Someone offers you water without asking your name. You drink and thank them. Your voice feels dusty from disuse. Here, there are no temples, no ramps or scaffolding. Just the scent of wood smoke and fresh bread, the sound of wind through barley fields. It's a different world, but your eyes, now shaped by the pyramid, catch details others might miss, the way a doorway leans just slightly off square, the careful stacking of storage jars, the precision with which a mother folds a mat and tucks its edge under. You settle into a shaded corner of the village and watch life unfold. A man sings to his oxen while plowing. A girl gathers flowers for dye. Two boys stack stones into a small tower before knocking it down, laughing each time they rebuild. It feels right, somehow. You pull the linen strip from your pouch, unfolding it gently. The frayed edges whisper with age, and for the first time, you notice a faint stain along one corner wine, perhaps, or sweat. You run your thumb across it. The rope it once belonged to carried blocks heavier than most animals. It frayed, it failed, it was tied again. Like people. Later that afternoon, you walk to the edge of the field where an old man sits weaving baskets. He glances up as you approach, nods, and gestures for you to sit. You do. You've come from the north, he says. You nod. The tomb. Again. A nod. He doesn't ask more. Instead, he hands you a coil of papyrus stem. Bend with the curve, he says. Nod against. You try. You fail. He chuckles softly and adjusts your grip. You try again. As you weave beside him, the sun sinks low. He tells you stories not of pyramids, but of fish, of seasons, of the year the floods came early and the goats learned to climb trees. His stories are not epic, but they are grounding. I never saw it, he says after a long pause. What the pyramid? Khufu's. I stayed here, raised goats, caught fish. But my brother, he worked there. Stone hauler. Said his hands never healed. He holds up his own. Fingers twisted with time. Mine did? You nod again. Unsure how to respond. I used to envy him, he adds. All that glory, that legacy. But now he shrugs. The fish still bite. My roof doesn't leak. He gave his life to something that didn't need his name. I gave mine to things that remember me. You sit with that. You finish your basket wobbly, uneven, but whole. He examines it and grins. Good. It'll carry olives, maybe two. You laugh, and for the first time in days, your chest feels light. That night, you sleep under a woven canopy beside the village's small water shrine. Frogs croak in the reeds. The stars are distant but familiar. Orion tilted just slightly from the view you'd known at Giza. You hold the basket in one hand, the stone cube in the other, and drift into sleep not with questions, but with calm. In your dream, the pyramid returns not towering, but close, eye level. You see each block, each mark, each crew name scribbled in red. You hear chants and laughter and the rustle of sand under bare feet. And then it fades, replaced by a single square of earth, a garden, small and quiet. A child waters it with a clay cup. You awaken with the dawn, dew beading on your skin. the scent of baking bread wafting in from the village. It's time to move again, not toward another monument, not toward greatness, just forward. You gather your things, the pouch, the basket, your breath. The world awaits not in grandeur, but in the soft weight of days. As you step onto the dusty path leading away from the village, the pyramid flickers in your memory one last time, not as a structure, but as a rhythm, a pulse, a beginning, and you walk on. The path stretches ahead, narrow, sunlit, occasionally winding between groves of palm or dipping into shallow ditches carved by runoff and time. You walk without urgency, your footsteps steady but light. The basket bumps gently against your hip with each step, and the pouch around your neck swings just enough to remind you it's still there. Your legs, once sore from labor and climbing, now move with quiet endurance. You've grown into this pace. It belongs to you now. As the village disappears behind you, you find yourself humming. You don't recognize the tune, but it rises naturally from your chest like breath, shaped by memories too complex for words. It's not a song of triumph. It's not even a farewell. It's simply a continuation, soft, rhythmic, unspoken. By mid-morning, you reach a shaded glen where the ground flattens out into what might once have been a gathering place. Stone seats circle the remains of an old fire pit. You sit for a while and eat some bread a villager gave you, coarse and dry, but with a comforting taste of honey and cumin. As you chew, you notice carvings etched into the stone nearest you. Nothing formal, just initials, a stylized ibis, a date, maybe. Someone was here, maybe many someones, and they left a mark not loud or monumental, but enduring. Later, as the sun reaches its peak, you pass a pair of traders walking in the opposite direction. They carry bundles of textiles dyed in soft reds and deep blues. One of them asks if you've come from the river. You nod. They tell you the water's high this year, good for the papyrus harvest, not so good for the fish. You thank them and wish them safe travels. They don't ask where you're going. No one has. Not since you left the pyramid. It's as if your direction has ceased to be a question. Only emotion. By late afternoon, the road rises again. Not sharply. Just enough to offer a glimpse of a small city in the distance. You recognize the geometry of its streets, the way the rooftops cluster near a temple. It isn't grand, but it's alive. And after the vast silence of the pyramid, the sight of people milling in a marketplace, of fabric fluttering from windows, of donkeys tied to shaded posts, it feels intimate, human. You enter slowly, taking in every detail, the smell of spices, the clatter of bronze cups, a mother chasing a laughing child through a cluster of grapevines. You realize you're smiling, your muscles unfamiliar with the gesture after days of solemn reflection. At a stall near the center, a young man sells clay figurines, gods, animals, miniature pyramid replicas. One catches your eye, a small builder, kneeling, arms outstretched with a block balanced between them. You pick it up. It's imperfect, one leg slightly shorter than the other. The paint on its face smudged, but it holds something the others don't. Not precision, presence. You buy it and nestle it gently beside the other tokens in your pouch. The merchant says, "He's not famous, but he's strong. My father used to say the strongest ones are always the quietest." You nod again, feeling that truth in your bones. As the city settles into evening, you find a spot near the riverbank to sleep. The air is cooler here, touched by the water's breath. You sit for a while with your legs in the shallows, letting the current press gently against your skin. You watch families light lanterns in their homes, their flickering glow mirrored in the water. You think of the workers' village, the glow of cooking fires, the scent of lentils, the shuffle of sandals on packed dirt. You think of the chants, the ramps, the blocks hoisted skyward like offerings. But the memories no longer tug, they rest. As if the part of you that needed to carry the pyramid has finally placed it down, not in forgetting, but in peace. You dry your feet on a patch of cloth and settle onto a bed of reeds and woven palm. The cities hum behind you, the stars blinking into place above. You close your eyes, and you dream again. But this time, you are not building. You are walking. Through groves, along river banks, across bridges carved from cedar. In your dream, you meet other travelers, each carrying something different. A reed flute, a broken pot, a scroll with no ink. They nod to you, and you nod back, and together you walk in silence. Not because there's nothing to say, but because you are part of something that speaks for itself. When you wake, the sun is just beginning to rise, the city still half asleep. You rise quietly, shoulder your basket, adjust the pouch around your neck, and begin walking again, not toward a specific destination, but toward the life that waits in the open spaces between stories. This is where you belong now, not just in memory, but in motion. The pyramid will always be there, its angles etched into your breath, its silence folded into your steps. You carry it with you, not to explain, not to impress, but to remember, because you were there. You saw the stones rise. You felt the rope snap and the hands that tied it again. You heard the laughter echo inside the walls before the pharaoh ever arrived. And that more than legacy, more than history, is what endures. Not the monument, but the ones who built it. Now, as you take your final steps beneath the lavender sky, the world begins to soften. The road no longer demands your feet. The breeze no longer pushes your shoulders. The birds, the water, the leaves, they all quiet themselves around you, as if the whole landscape understands it's time to rest. You settle beneath a tamarisk tree, its branches casting a loose net of shadow across your face. The sun lowers behind a hill, not suddenly, but gently, as though it too is tucking itself in. And in this stillness, you look back not at the pyramid, but at everything it taught you, about work, about silence, about the invisible hands that hold up the world. You close your eyes and remember the feel of stone under your fingers, the scent of sweat and sand, the sound of laughter rising through dust. You remember the call of the foreman, the rhythm of hammers, the creak of sledges on wet sand. But more than that, you remember the quiet pride in the way a block fit just right. The trust passed from hand to hand in the heat of the day. The knowledge that you were part of something far too large to finish alone. And now, that part is complete. You let your breath slow, let your body release the last weight it held. The stars return like old companions. The Nile flows, calm and steady. Somewhere, a reed flute plays. And you, dear traveler, quiet builder of memory, rest now in the knowledge that what you helped create still stands. Not just in stone, but in story. And stories, they last. End of script. Sweet dreams.